That North Korea issue, the president said earlier today that he's prepared to reveal the time and location of the North Korea summit in just a couple of days. So that is coming up and something to watch. Also, we had Sarah Huckabee Sanders today asked about all of this. And here's what she said. Some new developments might be coming on Iran.
As the president said yesterday, he would like to see something happen, but we are 100% committed to making sure that Iran does not have nuclear weapons. And until we see that happen, we're going to continue to put maximum pressure, enormous sanctions on them. All of the sanctions that were in place before the deal are back in place, and we are preparing to add additional sanctions that may come as early as next week.
So that's the key there, Melissa. The White House press secretary is saying additional sanctions may come as early as next week on Iran. That's pretty much even as the White House is negotiating this North Korea nuclear deal. So two big nuclear deals taking place at the same time, going in very different directions. The president getting out of the Iran deal, but into a possible North Korea deal right in the same week here. And one of the big uncertainties around all of this is what the reaction is going to be among European governments and European companies, and just how intently the United States will deal with those European companies if they continue to do business in Iran. How will the United States handle that under this new sanctions regime? We don't have a lot of clarity on that point at this point. We've been pressing Treasury Department and White House officials for more details on that. We'll bring them to you when we have them, Melissa.
All right, Eamon, thank you. Eamon Javers at the White House. For more on what exiting the Iran nuclear deal could mean, let's bring in CNBC's Leslie Picker, who is in Las Vegas, sitting down with the former Secretary of Defense under President Obama, Leon Panetta. Leslie, take it away.
Hey, Mel, thanks so much. Secretary Panetta, thank you for joining me.
Nice to be with you.
Obviously, a very topical day for you to be here, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this Iran situation with the U.S. unilaterally pulling out of the deal. With no plan B, do you expect there to be another plan? And in the meantime, are we setting ourselves up to be on a collision course, either economically or geopolitically?
Well, obviously, the greatest concern is that I don't see a strategy here. I don't see a plan B. And the problem is, if we've offended our allies, which we have, by basically dropping out of that agreement, we're possibly going to implement sanctions. And if our allies continue to abide by the agreement, we would have to sanction our allies. We've raised questions about trust and whether they can trust whatever we can agree to. And I think in large measure we've lost our leverage in terms of getting Iran to the table, because Iran has no incentive really to sit down and negotiate on anything right now. So my concern is that in that vacuum, we are left with a negotiation which isn't likely to happen, or some kind of potential military confrontation in the future. And that's a lousy choice.
Which do you think is more likely of those two?
I think the problem really is going to depend on Iran. If Iran decides that as a result of what the United States did, that they're going to now implement new enrichment and start to develop the kind of capability that could lead to a nuclear weapon, then I don't think there's any other option but the potential of some kind of military action, because Israel certainly isn't going to tolerate Iran developing a nuclear weapon. And if Israel acts, they will, by virtue of just agreements with the United States, drag us into that conflict.
And if there is a conflict, one of the main concerns, of course, with the U.S. unilaterally pulling out of the deal is what that means for our European allies, what that means with our relationship with China.
Sure.
What happens if we are pulled into some sort of conflict? Can we depend on the European allies as we have in previous conflicts in the past?
Well, the problem is in the world of today, we have a number of flashpoints around the world that we're dealing with, crises around the world. And it's not just Iran, it's ISIS, it's Middle East failed states like Syria, it's Russia, it's China, it's cyber attacks. And the reality is the United States cannot deal with these crises without our allies, without our alliances. We can't do this alone. And here we are taking our greatest allies, France, Great Britain, Germany, and basically throwing them out the window in terms of the agreement that we signed with them. And I think China and Russia who probably already have concerns about what the United States is doing, we've just increased the level of distrust with them as well. So we are not in a very good position right now to build the kind of trust. And this is all about trust. You can't have any deals. You can't work out any negotiations without mutual trust. And what we've raised are real questions about whether or not you can trust our country.
Now, this maximum pressure campaign tactic, this negotiating strategy that Trump has utilized, has appeared to at least bring North Korea to the bargaining table. And of course, the three people were released today. Do you think that this is hot air? Do you think that there's an actual solution to be had here? What do you make of what's going on in North Korea?
Well, look, this is a president who likes to operate by chaos. He's torn up a lot of agreements. He tore up the TTP agreement, and yet there was no strategy as to how we replace that. We left the Paris Agreement with no strategy as to how we replace that. He got rid of DACA without saying we should fix it, but then where was the strategy? On North Korea, obviously, we did implement sanctions. We have the chance to sit down and try to negotiate. And I'm pleased, obviously, that we were able to get our prisoners back. But the real question is, wait a minute, this is about denuclearization. And we have heard nothing with regards to the specifics of denuclearization. What do you do about verification? What do you do about inspections? All of the issues that have to be worked on that very frankly take time. And I don't think we have a strategy yet as to how we're going to approach that.
Now, a lot of people are looking at Bitcoin as a way to go around the sanctions, that companies can potentially utilize Bitcoin as a currency to go around the sanctions put in place in Iran or other places, as well as potentially buy weapons using the currency. Do you have any thoughts about the utilization of Bitcoin and what we should be doing on a defense side to protect ourselves against that?
One thing we've always learned about sanctions is that our enemies always find ways to get around those sanctions in one way or another. North Korea did, utilizing both China and Russia. We've seen Iran, during the time we were implementing sanctions, try to find other ways to get around it. So there's no question in my mind that there will be efforts to try to find other ways to avoid those sanctions. I think the biggest problem right now is that if we are going to implement our sanctions, we're going to have to take steps to go after our allies who have said they're going to continue in the agreement. And the idea of our sanctioning France, Great Britain, and Germany, I think would be a terrible signal to the world in terms of the relationship with the United States. So the chances are that there will be efforts to look at other options, whether they'll be successful or not, whether we can find ways to stop them from going around it. I have no idea whether we're ready for that.
Do we have the ability to patrol the use of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies to engage in trade?
At this point in time, I don't think we really have that capability because we've never had to face that kind of situation. But I really do think at this moment in time, if we're going to have any hope of ultimately returning this situation to a negotiation, which I think is what the president wants to do, it's what others want to do. But what happened here is the president lost his leverage because we had them at least in a box with regards to developing nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. They're out of that box now. And that's what makes this a very dangerous situation for the United States and the Middle East.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.